What if the most important war in Westeros was never truly shown on screen? I'm not talking about the fall of dynasties we've already seen, or the civil wars we've debated for years. I'm talking about the single, brutal campaign that forged the Iron Throne itself. There is growing momentum behind the idea that HBO is developing a massive adaptation of Aegon's Conquest. And the most fascinating possibility is that it might not be a TV show. Instead, imagine it as a cinematic trilogy. Think of the scale of Dune, the mythic weight of the Lord of the Rings, but rooted in the grounded, cutthroat politics of Westeros. If this happens, it won't just expand the franchise. It could redefine how epic fantasy stories are told within this universe. Aegon's Conquest isn't just another Targaryen chapter. It's the foundation of everything that follows in Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. Before the Seven Kingdoms were united, Westeros was a fractured mess of rival realms constantly at war. Split the North, the Reach, the Stormlands, the Westerlands, the Riverlands, the Vale, and Dorne all had their own kings, their own grudges, and their own ambitions. Into that chaotic world came Aegon Targaryen from Dragonstone with his two sister wives, 3 dragons, and a vision that would change history forever. The source material for this era comes from books like Fire and Blood and The Rise of the Dragon. But here's the interesting part. These books read like historical records compiled long after the events, filled with gaps and contradictions. This gives the writers a huge amount of creative freedom. They aren't locked into one perspective. They can explore the emotional layers behind the legend. One of the most powerful ideas introduced in recent lore is that Aegon was driven by simple ambition. He was driven by prophecy. In House of the Dragon, we learned he had a dream of a coming catastrophe from the north. A second long night that would threaten all of humanity. In this light, his conquest wasn't a ruthless invasion. It was a desperate attempt to prepare a divided continent for an unseen enemy. Imagine a king haunted by nightmares of ice and darkness, convinced that time is running out while the rest of the world squabbles over petty crowns and castles. That internal conflict could be the emotional spine of the story, turning Aegon from a distant historical figure into a man burdened by knowledge no one else understands. Now, how this story is told as a TV show or a film trilogy will completely change the experience. A series would allow for a deep dive into each kingdom's perspective. We'd see the pride of the North, the defiance of the lands, and the sheer terror spreading across the Riverlands as dragons darken the skies. A trilogy of films, however, would be all about intensity and scale. The Field of Fire wouldn't just be mentioned. It would be an overwhelming cinematic spectacle. The destruction of Harrenhal wouldn't just be a historical footnote. We would experience the molten stone collapsing under dragon flame. A film format condenses events into emotionally charged chapters, emphasizing momentum and spectacle. And let's be honest, the dragons are why this story feels tailor-made for the big screen. Balerion the Black Dread wasn't just big. He was a living symbol of apocalyptic force. His shadow was said to engulf entire towns. Plying alongside him were Vega and Meraxes, creatures capable of reshaping battlefields in minutes. Bringing these 3 dragons to life at their full canonical scale requires a massive visual budget. On the cinema screen, they can feel mythic and terrifying in a way that elevates the Conquest from a historical drama to a legendary saga. The sight of 3 fully grown dragons descending upon an army could become one of the most unforgettable images in fantasy filmmaking history. But spectacle alone isn't enough. The real heart of the story would lie in the complex relationship between Aegon and his wives Visenya and Rhaenys. They were the original Targaryen triumvirate. Visenya is often portrayed as the disciplined, formidable warrior who understands the harsh necessities of power. She wielded the Valyrian steel sword Dark Sister and was a fierce dragon rider. Rhaenys, on the other hand, is remembered as charismatic, adventurous, and more inclined toward diplomacy and art. These contrasting personalities would create incredible tension in how they approach conquest, mercy, and ruling. Are they a united front, or does their private council chamber crackle with disagreement over how to build their new world? A well-structured trilogy could follow a perfect narrative arc. The first film could cover the decision to invade, the landing at the Blackwater Rush, and the stunning early victories that established the Targaryen threat. The second film could dive into the brutal consolidation of power across the continent, culminating in the legendary Field of Fire, where all 3 dragons were unleashed together for the first and only time, incinerating an army of 55,000 men. The final film could then tackle the one kingdom that refused to yield, Dorne. The Dornish campaign introduces tragedy and mystery into the story. It's in Dorne that Rhaenys and her dragon Meraxes are lost, shot down from the sky. This loss shifts the emotional tone of the conquest from calculated expansion to personal grief and vengeance. The war drags on for years, a brutal guerrilla conflict in the desert, until a mysterious letter from the Prince of Dawn convinces Aegon to finally make peace. The contents of that letter remain one of the biggest unanswered questions in Westerosi lore. An adaptation could finally reveal what it said, offering a powerful conclusion to the war. Beyond the immediate story, a cinematic trilogy would have huge implications for the entire franchise. It could reintroduce the world of Westeros to a global audience as a major theatrical event, right alongside ongoing TV projects like House of the Dragon and the upcoming A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Together, these different projects would create a rich, layered universe that balances intimate character studies with sweeping epics. And at the very center of it all is Aegon's conquest. The moment myth became political reality. What makes this story so compelling now is how it reframes the Iron Throne. It's no longer just a symbol of power won through violence. With a prophetic element, it becomes a monument to urgency, forged from the desperate belief that unity is the only defense against extinction. Every Targaryen ruler who sits on that throne inherits not only a crown, but a secret, sacred duty tied to Aegon's original dream. The conquest then becomes both a triumph and a warning, setting the stage for centuries of ambition, sacrifice, and eventual downfall. Ultimately, the success of this adaptation will come down to balance. It has to combine breathtaking dragon warfare with intimate human drama, epic scale with personal consequences. If it leans too heavily on spectacle, it risks losing the moral complexity that makes this world so great. The ideal version would weave these threads together, showing Aegon as neither a pure hero nor a simple tyrant, but as a complex leader navigating destiny, love, and loss in a world that might never truly understand his motives. Whether it becomes a film trilogy or an expansive series, Aegon's conquest is the most pivotal story left to tell in Westeros. It's the spark that ignited centuries of history, the moment dragons reshaped a continent, and the beginning of a dynasty defined by both fire and fear. If brought to life with the ambition and care it deserves, it could stand as one of the defining fantasy epics of our generations. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments if you'd rather see this as a movie, trilogy, or a TV series. And be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into our favorite fantasy worlds.